Welcome back. Today we're here with the amazing Lucia Fellers. She's a lightning soul renewal practitioner. She's a plant medicine guide. She's a master meditator. She's a medicine woman, and she knows how to truly dive into the depth of the heart and to heal what needs to be healed. I'm so thrilled to be here with you today, Lucia. Please say a little bit more about yourself.
I have taught yoga and mindfulness to well over 1,000 students. My yoga is trauma informed, and the Lightning Soul Renewal Practitioner Program really allowed me to add a beautiful tool to my toolbox. And also, like everyone to know that the medicine that I bring to the table is very deconstructive. So it looks very different than a lot of spiritual practices that they see out there today. The plant medicine ceremonies that I facilitate and guide are groundbreaking for people. I've had clients who have had 30 years of PTSD gone from one session. So it's been a really beautiful medicine, and just getting to share this myself with you today is really wonderful, and I'm really honored to be here. Thank you.
So, Lucia, you
Mhm.
have so much of inner healing work that you have processed through your life. And would you share a little bit about your personal background that has led to you hold space for this profound healing that you're
Yeah,
facilitating?
I come from a lot of trauma in my background. As a young child, I've had sexual abuse, incest. My dad was an alcoholic until I was 9. My mom was very non-emotional, not engaged. And also, as an adult, there was much more trauma. My first husband was incredibly abusive, not just to me. I had children at a very young age, and he was very abusive to them as well. After that first marriage, I got divorced, and that included a lot of trauma all on its own. I didn't have a kind of family network to lean into. And throughout this process, I was in therapy. I did a lot of other healing work on myself. And so that included things like yoga and meditation. I started yoga when I was pregnant with my twin, 25, that would have been 26 years ago.
Wow.
And I've been a dedicated practitioner ever since.
Yes.
Um, yeah, and so that also included lots of ceremonies and lots of hypnosis. I'm also a hypnosis practitioner, hypnotic coach. So that just means I focus on goals and not the traumas. Everything I do is trauma informed. And I myself also struggled with addiction with alcohol. And so, and when I worked at 911 for 6 years, and I was smoking at that time, and also quit smoking using these healing techniques. So the first focus was me, right? The first focus was me. And then I took these techniques to help others. And I'll just talk a little bit about after the divorce, my daughter, she started self-harming and had an incident of attempted suicide. And we went to all the appointments. We were doing several different group therapy appointments. We were doing individual therapy appointments. She had been hospitalized several times. She was on medication. And throughout this process, I didn't feel resourced, and neither did she. We'd leave an appointment and we wouldn't have tools to use to help her through the next 24 hours or to help us as a family navigate this. The biggest instruction was to lock all, medications and sharp objects in a lockbox. But outside of that, there weren't, behavioral tools and tools that told us how to support each other or her. And so that was really not only disappointing, but it just felt isolating, and it felt defeating. It felt defeating and hopeless. So that's when I started researching what works. And that's actually what led me to hypnosis. And so that's when I became a hypnotic coach practitioner, because all the research out there proves over and over again that hypnosis helps people get through the healing process for these kinds of things. We don't have a lot of research on that in the United States, but there is a lot of research for that in the UK. And that's because it's just part of their medical practice. It's just part of their medical program. So I will say that, and say all of those things have brought me to ceremony. And I'm a bibliophile and an intellectual, so I read all the time. So it's really important to me that the practices that I engage in stay current with the most recent research as well, especially on the brain. And so that, of course, brings us to lightning soul renewal process, right? Um, and you and I were talking about a little bit before the interview with how impactful it is, because it allows us to be present in a compassionate way with everything that we feel, supported. We have this support system as we're going through the process.
Tell me a little bit more about your journey and the pretty dreadful unfolding of life you had in your earlier age. And then you've gone through incredible inner work and healing. Tell me a little bit more about your personal journey of what has kept you going, because you have had some extreme challenges that would break most people, that would probably cause most people to check out and say, that's it, I've had enough.
Yeah.
But here you are, and you're shining your light, and you're sharing your story, and you're inspiring others. And you are every day holding space and facilitating some of the deepest healing work for people to heal in the most remarkable ways.
Yeah.
How do you
So,
do it?
yeah, absolutely. So as we continue through my life experiences, right, as an adult, I have continued to work on my own healing, and this looks very different, I'd say, month by month. But let me say, this includes a very dedicated daily mantra practice. This includes mudra practices. This includes the lightning soul renewal process. This includes rituals and ceremonies on a regular basis. My own hypnotic practices on myself, self hypnosis. The rituals and ceremonies I really can't separate out, along with the plant medicine facilitation. Now, I've been working with plant medicine now for 6 years, around that amount of time. All of these things together have created a foundation for me to be able to completely fall apart, because there was no holding it together, right? And I had this foundation that allowed me to do that. And so we'll fast forward, and my kids have practiced the lightning soul renewal processes. And I thought I'd share how the very first one they were like, yeah, that was good. And it was the second one that they said, we get it. We get it. The first one, they felt like they were kind of uncomfortable and a little sheltered. And I always feel like the first lightning soul renewal process is almost like a getting to know the practice kind of experience. And then the second one, you're more open and you dive in and you give it more of your whole being. And they said, oh, that's when they felt the shift. They felt it, and they experienced the fullness of it. So I thought that that was really special. So I got to share that with them. I have 5 children, 4 surviving, and that's what's leading us into this most recent trauma. And so I have identical twins, and they were both drone pilots, sergeants in the United States Army. And they had just gotten back to Colorado Springs because they were deployed in other places before. And after having been here for about a year and a half, I think, one of my identical twins, Cameron, a series of events occurred. He's never had a history of mental health issues. He's never had a history of any kind of suicidal ideation or anything like that. And he died by suicide 25 hours after Father's Day. And so this experience definitely did completely break me apart. I think that's the reality, though, not just in this experience, but in life. We have to be willing to be completely well, I always liken it to the chrysalis and the liquefaction. That is a death. We have to welcome the life cycles of death and rebirth for ourselves in order to continue on, in order to be. Because I think the problem, Heidi, is that too many people experience these tragedies and try to continue in the same way they were before.
Yeah,
And
that
I
won't
think
work.
that, right, it won't work. It won't work. We have to everything has to be redesigned. And this isn't just because of the trauma and how, that redefines us as humans, but it is also because of how the brain works.
Very true.
And so these ruptures in our fabric of space and time, right? There is nothing as traumatic as losing a child at any age. It is a traumatic loss.
Yeah.
And so within, I think, the first month, I immediately started seeking community support. So I got in touch with grief support groups and a one-on-one mentor who is also a bereaved mom. And these communities really sustained me. Of course, I got my hands on lots and lots of books to find out how other people did it. And I went to the practices that were tried and true from the past. None of these practices eliminate the pain. And none of these practices eliminate the process of grief. But what they do is they create a resilient background for us to be able to hold these incredible emotions that have never been felt in our life before.
Amazing.
Hmm. Hmm.
How did you honor your grief? How did you get in touch with the depth of the emotions? I can
Yeah,
imagine there are times when you just feel so numb and it's like not your body at all. And so that embodiment of working through and living through this loss, this
yeah,
separation from your baby boy.
yeah. Yeah. Um, you know, some people will experience a lot of kind of numb feelings. I didn't really have a lot of numb feelings for me. It was, I'm pretty adept at feeling my feelings. And so that's been a practice of mine forever, right? And so I felt those feelings, and the way that I supported myself in that, again, was oftentimes seeking support from bereaved parents and listening to what helped support them to feel the feelings. I think we have to have this structure of support around us in order to feel the feelings. I mean, oftentimes we don't feel safe in our home environments or in the world or in order to feel, right?
Yes.
And oftentimes people aren't safe throughout their lives. They haven't been a safe place for them to feel either because of their negative self-talk or any of those other things, right?
Yes.
So luckily, when I lost my son so tragically to a way of death that is truly impacting Americans in a unparalleled way, you know, it's just become second leading cause of death for juveniles. We don't have the support to feel our feelings, maybe externally. I often talk about internal and external resources. So we can have lots of internal resources, but if we don't have enough external resources, so that includes things like money, that includes things like friends, and I don't just mean any friends, I mean trusted friends that can sit with us, non-judgmental, right?
Yes.
In our home environment, our country, our society at large. These all frame our external resources, and our internal resources are things like skills, habits, patterns, thought processes, right?
Yes.
So for me, I immediately knew I needed a sweat lodge. So we practiced that for Cameron. I also knew that I needed to practice ceremony with him and his body. And I fought for that with the funeral home because there was a lot of pushback.
Yes.
And this was a single thing that can help people in their grieving process. It's to eliminate as many regrets as possible after the death, right? This
So
is a
important.
point, right? Absolutely.
Did you pull on a lot of forgiveness practices in order to work with dissolving the regrets?
Yeah, absolutely. For myself. And so some people have anger and issues of regrets that they have outside of themselves. So they might have that for their kids, especially kiddos that have had years of substance use. There might be some feelings there,
Sure.
but it depends, and every situation is different. I didn't have any of that with Cameron. What I had definitely were regrets for myself. So yes, I
Mm.
had to go into those forgiveness practices, which of course is part of the lightning soul renewal process, right? There are all these forgiveness practices in there. And we can find forgiveness practices woven in. There were many times that I would go into specific situations leading up to his death that I would imagine being there with him, just so that he wasn't alone. And so oftentimes, these practices have come into just an almost natural way for me to facilitate my grief, to facilitate that process. Even the somatic, right? Even the movement has been a really big part.
Oh my
Um,
gosh,
yeah,
yes.
yeah,
The
Heidi,
grief,
yeah,
it's so stuck, the emotion, it's so heavy, it's so deep, deep, deep seated in there. So
yeah,
to move that through in the tissues, yes.
yeah. And so has been resting and being able to like really, truly, compassionately honor my need for sleep. There were some
Yes.
days where, getting dressed was all that was available to me in my, is that was all the energy that I had. And I would honor that. I would honor the fullness of that. And I think that's really also challenging for grieving people in our world today because of the um, society's propaganda that everybody needs to be productive and everybody needs to be busy and everybody needs to be doing, and
Yeah, the
that's
shift from
right,
doing to
right.
being.
Yep,
Yes.
exactly,
Yes.
exactly. And so because I had so much practice in the past with being, allowing myself to rest when I needed to rest and really just following that guidance.
If you were to share a few pointers to somebody that's watching right now, if you're watching right now and you're like, how am I going to start honoring my feelings? Where do I even begin? Where to start? How to truly get into that self-love of beginning to even recognize I have a need right now.
I always start with safety first. And I'd say, look at your environment. Does your environment and the people around you support you feeling feelings? If your friends who love you when you're happy and love you when you're, a go-getter and super productive and taking care of all the things and love to bring you their feelings, but aren't supportive of you feeling all the range of emotions that a human feels. I think safety is a really big deal because if we end up in a place or a situation or around people who can't support our feelings as we allow them to emerge, um, oftentimes that can create more trauma. That's
Very
all. It
true.
can create more trauma. So first safety, and I'd say here, this is what I'd go with the second. If you're in an environment that maybe, has a lot of elements that aren't safe for you to feel in, okay? Your external environments don't allow you to feel safe in. Or maybe there's just a lot of chaos in the home, whatever it is. Then I would suggest paying someone, a professional, to hold space for you so that you can begin to learn to feel safe. So that would be the second. That would be the second thing, right? Find a professional. I think too often, especially again in our society, it's all about independence. The reality is humans are biologically wired for interdependence. We are meant to be living in communities and working together, feeling together. And oftentimes, what that hyper independence is actually a mask for is to protect ourselves from being hurt by leaning on another person that we cannot trust because our trust has been so often misplaced in the past. So I'd say that. I'd say first, are you safe to feel? Second, if you're not, then pay someone, a professional, to hold space for you to feel. And third, if you're not in a financial place to pay someone to work with you and your feelings, then get into a free support group because there are many,
There are a lot
many.
of resources
There
around.
are a lot of free support groups. And so look at those, get into those. And then I'd say another place to begin that I think is very um, a safe place to begin to kind of see what you might feel if those other things have been met would be to start journaling. I'd say start journaling um, to bear witness to some of these feelings in a way that is observational, right? You can see if there's a lot of negative self talk that you didn't witness before. And also, there's this really beautiful thing that happens in our brains when we write that's very different than typing. So I'm not talking journaling on a computer. However, um, if you have different abilities and you need to use a computer or you need to use Dragon speech to text or any of those other methods, journal that way. Um, any method that is available to you is far more valuable than not doing it. But I would start there. I would start there. There are a lot of meditation practices and even yoga practices that I've seen that just bring up so many feelings that people aren't really internally resourced to hold space for, that I really think a professional practitioner or facilitator or therapist needs to be present for, to help people be supported in feeling them.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of energy in these
Mhm.
traumatic feelings and emotions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when going through these
Mhm.
feelings and emotions, it can feel like the room caving in. So that professional support in order to hold the space and to remind and to energetically to truly facilitate the healing work. Yes, it's
Yeah.
so valuable. It's so important. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, I'd like to hear a little bit more about your personal experience with honoring your
Yeah.
emotions. What
Yeah.
that
Mhm.
what that looks like for you.
Absolutely. So I want to talk about some of the journaling and art therapy techniques that have been monumental in supporting my process. I went to the Compassionate Friends, which is a grief conference for bereaved parents. And they've been really monumental in supporting me in my grieving process. And you go to these groups, and other bereaved parents are there, and we get to support each other. And there are bereaved parents of all different states of grieving. So, in other words, there are some people who are really fresh in their grief, and there are other people who are maybe even 20 years out. And usually the facilitators are peers. They're just other bereaved parents. So there's really a space of non-judgment. It's safe to feel all the things that you're feeling, and you get to see that it's possible to live again,
Mm, wow.
right? And
Yes.
so that was really a resource that I grabbed onto right away. And I found out about that from a bereaved parent when I went to practice the sweat lodge for my son right after his death. And it was another mom who told me about it. And her daughter died at 2 years old after being killed by the child babysitter. And so to be able to connect with other people who have experienced this kind of trauma and look at me in my eyes and say, I'm still alive, right? And you
Yes.
can be too. And this organization really helped me. I didn't even know they
Amazing.
existed before. I didn't have a reason to know they existed before, right?
Sure.
Um, and so let's fast forward to the conference. So I went to the conference last year, and they have workshops of every different type. And some of the ones I went to were focused on journaling, because one of the things that I was finding, I've been a some type of writer my whole life. After the death of my son, I would go to the journal and I would be just stuck there with this huge blank page, and it was daunting, and it was very hard for me to begin. And so I
Sure.
would find more often than not I just wasn't. So some of these journaling techniques provided me with structure to begin, and then I was having this really monumental free flow of expression that was tapping into these raw emotions of grief. And so one of the workshops I went to was by a mom whose both of her children died at the age of 17, 2 years apart, on the
Mm,
same stretch of road in a car accident. And so
yeah.
she created this method of journaling, which was called Alphabet Vignettes, was the workshop. And
Okay.
it was focusing on a letter of the alphabet And that is how you would begin your journaling. Whatever that word was that that letter brought to mind. For instance, for me, the letter D brought up drones and drone pilot, right? And then I would journal on that subject for the rest of that page, right?
Ah, I like that practice.
It
That
was
practice can
amazing.
really be adopted towards anything in
Absolutely.
life.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. Absolutely. It gives structure to journaling
Yes.
where you might have, or maybe you're just rote journaling about superficial things. It really allows you to get deeper because you're going in like a free flow practice. So that was very inspirational and very healing. That practice is one that I still use to this day. And another one that I went to, another workshop, was a Zentangle workshop by a woman who had lost her husband. That it was an immediate death. It wasn't like he'd been sick or anything. He just died immediately in his sleep next to her. No pre-existing conditions. So it was a method that she used in her healing. And so this is what often we do is we'll use a method that works for us in healing, and then we'll bring it um, to the conference. And so that's what this workshop attendant did. And so she taught techniques for drawing and also for prompts, right? So her prompt was when someone you love suddenly dies. And that would kind of, and then she would begin most every entry that way. And this was more of like an art journal. And so she'd have that prompt on this kind of side, and then the art would kind of flow around it.
Okay.
That prompt gave me something really huge to work with. And the art that she showed gave me a feeling of capability. I felt like I could do this. And it unlocked a lot of artistic expression in me. So when I was feeling like every single one of my cells was screaming in pain, I could create an artistic expression of that and write about that.
Amazing.
When I was so mad that I felt like I could burn the entire world and everyone in it, I could create an artistic expression of that and journal that in a way that I felt proud of, and in a way that I felt like, yes, that 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 is my feelings. And my daughter, my oldest daughter, Shauna, she said something to me. She said she would read it, and it's very raw and can be hard for people to read because it's so raw and so full of feelings, right? That's all it is my feelings on paper. And often these images are not, they're not pretty fun butterfly images, right? No.
No, the
No.
emotions and the feelings of the
Yeah,
grief is
exactly. Exactly.
extreme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she said maybe, just maybe, some of these things will stick onto the paper and will no longer, right? You'll no longer have to carry them with you.
Yeah, to find that way to
Mhm.
express,
Mhm.
whether it's on the paper or communicating with somebody else or letting it go in nature or giving it up. I want
Yeah.
to ask you, Lucia,
Yeah.
have you felt with your son, have you
Mhm.
felt his presence? Have you been able to communicate with him in any subtle way that has been helpful?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I definitely feel close to him about, I don't know, maybe a month or two after he died. The light in my bedroom would flicker, and I could ask questions and it would flicker in response or not. And so this was this felt like a connection and a way to communicate with Cameron that was really awesome. Jason and Descartes, that's my husband, that's Cameron's dad, and Cameron's little brother, who was 9 at the time of Cameron's death, would come in and they would do the same thing. They would be, we were all just really blown away by this light, and it would happen in different areas of the house, but most of all it would happen there. So that was a really awesome, and so it's things like that still happen today with lights. So it feels like a really easy way that he can like communicate with me. Definitely in meditation I have felt him talking to me. Definitely in hypnosis I can go into a really good space where I can go and talk to him and communicate with him through friends. Heidi, you have channeled him before for me, and that was really so powerful, so beautiful. My friend Deborah does medium work and has even wrote a letter from him to me because I was like, I really wanted a letter, something, and so she kind of took that to camera and channeled it out, and that was really beautiful. Also, in the mushroom medicine ceremonies. And so again, I have to say right now, so Heidi, you're looking at me and I am 2 years out from Cameron's death. And I work now, I mentor other bereaved moms, and that's part of my way of like honoring Cameron. And I've also done a workshop at the Compassionate Friends Conference in New Orleans. And it was on rituals and how rituals help process grief in ways that other therapeutic techniques do not.
Mm.
Um, so I have to say that in this state of functioning, I'm a very high functioning grieving parent. And I have seen people who are 10 years out and sometimes even 20 years out who are not at this level of functioning.
Yeah.
That being said, when I am in my mushroom medicine journeys, and I refer to the mushroom medicine as Los Niños Sagrados, which means the holy children, I tap into Cameron in a way that is not any of these other ways that are wonderful and amazing cannot touch this level of connection.
Mm.
There's no barrier. There's no
You feel the
there's
oneness.
no barrier, right?
Yes.
Um, you know, often in yoga and in other practices, we talk about samadhi, we talk about enlightenment, we talk about the ultimate truth. And what all of those things really boil down to, right? When you get to their finest elements, the truth is that samadhi and enlightenment and ultimate truth is love. It is love,
It
right?
is.
I know,
Yeah.
I know. I'm preaching to the choir here. I know, but
But
I
no,
also
you're
know
not preaching to the choir
many people don't. Yes, exactly. You're right.
because
Many
love
people don't.
has been misused.
Absolutely.
And if you're watching right now and you've had an unfortunate experience with the
Mhm.
word love, then there is lack of trust.
Yeah.
There's abuse associated with the word love. And so to find the way back into truly experiencing that safety of what the frequency and the vibration of even the word love, to practice I love me, that energy that can be evoked within us by those words, to find back into that energy of the word love is a big deal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. When I'm in meditation, it's an active participation and an active. I'm actively engaging to keep myself at that state. With Los Niños Sagrados, I do all the prep beforehand and I rest in that state.
Mm.
I surrender to the medicine in this wholly loving way. And that's purely because I have built up a relationship with that medicine. It's
And
not
what I
frivolous.
also hear you say is the surrender to
Mhm.
allow being with it,
Mhm.
rather than
Yeah.
what we talked about earlier, being stuck in the groove of having to do a lot of things.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Healing work is so much about coming to that honoring and the surrender of allowing the being.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. And I love the way that you put that. And then I also have to go back to safety, because the surrender, when you're talking about love and the trauma that people have been, you know, have had along with that word love, and even in situations that we'll just talk about parent situations. Oftentimes people think that their parents were loving to them, even though they were abusive. And abuse and love cannot coexist. They cannot. If there is um, if lying and deceiving is occurring, this is not loving. This is not loving.
Yes.
Open and honest communication, trustworthiness, a desire to respect another person and to want to know them. These
Mm.
things are loving. These things are loving. I often recommend Bell Hooks' All About Love to people who are on this journey of trying to figure out, what is love? What does that mean? And how can I cultivate that within myself and in my relationship? Because the people aren't taught. They're not taught. They think it's just a feeling, just a good feeling. Well, I love my partner because I have this good feeling when I'm around them.
There's
But
so
when
much
I
more.
Right, but when I
Yes.
ask, is the partner invested in the things that you're invested in? Does the partner support and nourish you and cultivate you? Um, is there that open, honest communication, that trustworthiness? And when those other
And
things, and they say no to those things, that's not love. That means it's a different thing.
exactly what I'm hearing you talk about is the unconditional love. What is your experience about cultivating that unconditional love? Because in my personal experience, that unconditional love that we're seeking in the outer world happens when we truly allow ourselves to experience and receive with an open heart the unconditional love that is present within our soul light.
Yeah, Heidi, I think unconditional love is dangerous. The title of it, because what it does is it presupposes that we won't have boundaries with other people.
Hmm.
Uh-huh, I know, I know.
That's an interesting
So,
perspective. Yes.
right.
Say
Yes,
more.
yes. I will. So, this idea, as a parent, that you'll have unconditional love for your child or your partner, and this opens the door to abuse, whether it is other people harming you or putting up with things that should not be allowed. So again, that lack of nurturing, if lack of nurturing is happening in a partner relationship, and they're not cultivating your blossoming, this idea, well, I will unconditionally love them and I will unconditionally love them through this. What that actually
Mm.
means is I'm not going to have any boundaries with this person. I'm going to
Right.
allow them
That's
to continue to harm me.
such an important point. Thank you for bringing that out.
Yeah.
And what I'm
Yeah.
also
Hmm.
seeing is that pattern of looking or thinking that the unconditional love is something outside of ourselves. To
So,
bring it home into our own heart, to truly take our power back and to recognize I am giving and receiving unconditional love within me.
yes. Now, see, that I think is not only possible, I think that is the enlightenment that our books talk about all the time. And I think that those of us who have an understanding of receiving unconditional love within ourselves and that compassion to be, because I do think that that's part of feeling our feelings and being a safe person to feel our feelings. I think it requires some type of unconditional love within us to say, no matter what, I deserve to be here. No matter
Very
what,
well said. Yes.
I'm worthy of this breath,
Mm,
right? I because I exist, am a gift to this world,
yes.
right? Like, there is that unconditional love that is present, and I also don't think that is something that can be taught. I think that that's something that has to be cultivated and felt. It's like this. Oftentimes people will talk about before you have your kid, and they're always talking about, you're going to love them more than you've ever loved anything in your life. You're and they tell you, and I can't describe it to you. I can't explain it to you. And you think to yourself, all new parents think to themselves, well, I love this kiddo growing inside of me. Or, if you're preparing for adoption, you're thinking about how much you're preparing for them and how much you love them, right? And you can't imagine how that could be more. And you love other people in your life, right? Maybe your
Mhm.
partner, and maybe your parents, maybe your siblings. But then when this new child is either born or brought into your arms for the first time, there is this experience of your heart cracking open even more, and you experience a love that you have never experienced before, that no one could explain to you, no one could describe to you. And I think this unconditional, that tapping in to that universal oneness, that what I call in physics, it's called the unifying field. When we tap into that and we feel this overwhelming, awe-inspiring sense of love that cracks us open even more, it's not something that, no matter how much I explain it to someone or take them through different practices, the practices are meant to facilitate an environment where they can experience that for themselves.
Exactly. Well
Right?
said. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. Thank you, Lucia. You have shared some beautiful ways to dive in and connect with emotions at a deeper level. You have beautifully shared so remarkably well about the grieving journey and how practices of journaling can help, and how the lightning soul renewal process has helped you, and how hypnotherapy has helped you, and the rituals and the plant medicines, how it all has boiled into this incredible healing journey for yourself, and how now, just 2 years out, here you are functioning, being the mom of 4 children, keeping your family together, and beyond that, building your practice and holding space and facilitating healing work for the world and anybody who's ready to really dive deep at these deeper levels to heal the heart. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing about
Oh,
your journey. I want to ask you, is there anything else you feel guided or compelled or have a desire to share?
yeah, I think there's one other thing I just want to say to all people listening out there. If any of them have been feeling or know of someone that feels suicidal, right? That there is love here for you, and we want you here. We need you, no matter what those thoughts are saying. We need you. Get a trained professional that will help in those critical moments. And so I want to say that, and I want to say my son's name, Cameron Parker, and it's uh, important that we say their name, and so I do.
Yeah. Thank you for
Thank
sharing
you,
that.
Heidi. I
Mm,
appreciate this opportunity to share with you, just a teeny glimpse into some of these practices that have been really beneficial to me, and for being such an instrumental part of my life, and such a safe friend. As a bereaved parents, we often talk about safe friends and unsafe friends, and thank you. Thank you for being such a safe friend, and just a wonderful, wonderful human. I love you so much. Mm, mm.
I receive that love with an open heart. Let's end with bowing down to ourselves and honoring our true spirit, our soul nature, the soul starlight that we truly are. And let's remember that it's never, ever, never, ever, ever too late to heal at all levels. Namaste.
Namaste.